171, CMMC is my bread and butter. So I'm still involved with that in Microsoft. So if you have questions along that, I am here for that. I'm also your chief complaint officer. Tim's already hit me up with complaints or questions for GCC, GCC High. So hopefully I can try and answer any questions that I can. But today we're going to talk about Security Copilot, Copilot for Security. It's changed its name again, but if we wouldn't be Microsoft if we weren't rebranding and marketing trying to keep their jobs. So no offense, Pepper. So I'll probably go back and forth. I'm going to try and stick to a little bit of background, kind of try and make you more comfortable, Beth, with embracing AI for you, for your customers, because partners are what make Microsoft great. So I'm really happy to be here supporting R3 and the rest of you with this today. But try and give you the background of AI at Microsoft, the different co-pilots, and then I'm going to do a demo, and we're going to try a live demo, which is always precarious, but my demo tenant is also GCC. So we're currently testing it, and I'm helping with the testing for when it comes and is available within GCC, and then they're working on all the documentation for FedRAMP to then hopefully come into GCC High. So all of this forthcoming. But like Beth, everybody thinks this is what AI is going to be. It's going to be Skynet, it's going to be robots, it's going to be taking over the world. And that is not what we are aiming to do with AI. A little kind of history lesson, if you will. AI is not new. AI has been around for a while in different forms and fashions. It is generative AI is what's new, the new shiny thing. But machine learning, that's already in the products you use today. Cognitive search, algorithms, it's just data and data retrieval. And so when we talk about, AI, Clippy was before Copilot. Clippy is making a comeback, everybody, so keep your eyes out. But so when we talk about AI, and then when we talk about how Microsoft uses AI, so these are Microsoft's AI principles, and we call it responsible AI. If you hear people use the term responsible AI, that's what we do when we're building our different AI products. It's deeply embedded in, Microsoft Security Future initiatives, secure by default. But we are thinking about availability, integrity, privacy. Like, is this giving you good information back? What is that information grounded in? And I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit and use the whiteboard. So sorry for the recording. But so when AI came out, you've got OpenAI. That's who also Microsoft has a big partnership. That's who we partner with when we're developing our Azure OpenAI, as well as what is grounded in all of our other AI products. But this is out in the open, free and open. Chat GPT, especially if I could spell, chapped for short. Twitter, Gronk has their own. You've got Meta AI. They're all grounded in this large language model, because that's all OpenAI is doing, is they're developing the large language model, and then that is free and open. We have a boundary at Microsoft. So we have taken that and we have created Azure OpenAI using that model. And then with that model and Azure OpenAI, this is within our Microsoft boundary. So anything that is happening in Azure OpenAI is not training that OpenAI model. It's not training ChatGPT. So that information is not going out into the ether. Now, we have another boundary. This is your tenant. This is your customer's tenants. This is a customer that's having a meeting down the hall talking about all the co-pilots today with my friend Jeff. This is the customer tenant. This is you. And so if you have Copilot, which I'm really bad at design, that is the Copilot logo. This is taking basically any Copilot is a copy of this large language model. So as the model gets updated, we're now in like 4.0 or whatever it is now, that is basically like a software update to your Copilot. So now you have that updated model, but the information that it is grounded in is within your tenant. So it is not going back and training the models. Your information is safe. That is that privacy and security that we talk about. And we'll talk about, we're talking about Copilot for security, but we will talk about the data security a little bit in some of the other sessions, and how you can get ready for the Copilots and preparing your data, your policies internally. But the biggest thing that I like to tell customers, I've been having this like AI debunked conversation the whole year, ever since we came out with Copilot, is that your data is your data. And we're going to hit on it again. Your data is your data. It's not training the foundational model. If it's training, it is within your tenant. And so it's those access control policies. It's that sensitive information labeling, that is protecting that data. That is the scary part with AI, is that Copilot turns on the lights. Either one, any of them. We'll go to that in a minute. Copilot's going to turn on the lights. And so if you are not protecting that data, if you don't have walls up, that access control to that SharePoint site or that OneDrive, then Copilot is going to show it. If you don't have encryption on that data, Copilot's going to show it. So that is why, no matter which Copilot you're using, you want to go back and look at what are our data security policies, what are we doing, what technology do we have in place to protect that. So because it's really that unknown, inadvertent human spillage, because they're going to go ask Copilot a question and then it's going to pull up the information. So, but really what all the Copilots are truly doing is this retrieval augmentation generation. The large language models are basically, you have that information grounded, you're asking it a question, and it is bringing you back the information based upon your prompt and what information it's grounded in. And so that's why we have a Copilot for everything. That's why there is a, Baskin-Robbins flavor, 31 flavors of Copilot, because it's what is that information grounded in? So your Copilot for M365, that's your productivity data, that's your Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint. So that is where, that is what people are looking at for their end users. That is what a lot of end users are like, oh, I want to use this. I was teaching my friend's children about Clippy at breakfast this morning, and I used Copilot to write me a poem about Clippy, a little love sonnet. And it did it. And so, but I've used this, like I wrote a white paper or a WinWire or something. I wanted to condense it down to a few sentences to put into my performance eval. And I said, hey, Copilot, use this document, summarize it in 2 to 3 sentences for a performance eval. And then it did. And it had all the points that I really wanted to touch on as far as customers who was there, et cetera, and the impact. And then, that bullet for my performance eval was done. So what would have taken me probably like 5 minutes to kind of pontificate and say how great it was going to be or whatever, Copilot did it in 5 seconds. Your Copilots for GitHub, that's really for your developers, for your query languages, how to develop code, like taking natural language and giving you code. I'm not a coder. I was Army helicopter pilot, health sciences educated, and now I'm in security IT. So that was not my path. It still perplexes me to this day. So Copilot can be my help if I ever need to figure out KQL as well. And we're going to see some of that in the demo. But then that Copilot for security, it is grounded in your security data. And I'm going to jump ahead 2 slides, I think. Get to there. Well, so it's grounded in your security data. So it doesn't matter what you're using for security tools. There's a plugin for it. It can then reason over that data. So when you are doing an investigation or you are asking it questions, it can pull from not just Microsoft tools, but it can pull from Tanium. It can pull from the threat intelligence and add that threat intelligence and give you a more comprehensive investigation into whatever that prompt is, whether it's an incident, an alert, you're doing a user investigation. It's going to help you, or if you're just trying to develop a threat report, you can even just look up, like, tell me about Manatee Tempest, which we're going to do in a little bit. And it's going to give you all of that, taking a natural language question, giving you natural language back, but also giving you it back in like telling you what it did. It's not just doing it for you and then saying, okay, here's your answer. It's teaching. So you can have somebody, even the most senior person, they might be like an endpoint expert. But then when it comes to adding all the other pieces of an investigation, this can help them get that information without having to be an expert in some of the other tools. And so really the things that we are looking at, the benefits of Security Copilot today, right? Because there's no automation that's added in with Copilot. We'll kind of talk we can talk a little bit more about that. You know, that is the Copilot for security of the future. But this is, that version 1. This is that 2010 Prius or the first version of the Tesla. The Teslas made today are a lot better than before. This is that kind of, we are in the era of what is that first version. So doing things simply, efficiently, taking someone who's junior or brand new, you can now hire somebody right out of college and put them in your SOC without having to do a ton of training because Copilot can help them. Or if you have somebody filling in, like a help desk person, and they're like, I don't know anything about identity, but why is Lynn Robbins locked out? And they can look it up and a Copilot will give you the steps. It's that guided steps. So we don't have the automation there yet, but we have the guided steps of what you can do for remediations. And then how we'll also look at, because you have Copilot standalone and then you have Copilot embedded. So your investigators, they can be looking at that standalone, working in the prompt books, doing the investigations, or if there's somebody working in the Defender portal, they can see everything that they're looking at from a specific incident where you do have some automations like attack disruption, but then Copilot can give those summaries and give guided next steps. So you still get some of these benefits that are in the standalone in the embedded experience. And so this, from a data flow perspective, is really, yeah.
Does this mean that when you're saying that it does investigation, how does it work with litigation hold?
So it can reason over like purview. So if there is a litigation hold, it can and you say tell me, is this a risky user? And as long as, if I ask it that question, and we'll look at what that looks like in one of the examples, but as long as I have access to know and see in purview that there is a hold, it will tell me if there's a hold. Okay. Now it will also say you should probably disable this person, or depending on what your internal processes are, you can then have the next step is to give this user information to person X and they'll put them on lit hold or put them on lit hold. So it's taking what your internal processes are into consideration with that guidance, but it's also based upon what information it's connected to. So if you don't have it plugged into Purview, I'm not going to be able to see whether or not they have a litigation hold using the standalone experience. So that's really where the power of the Copilot comes in, is based upon what information it can reason over. And one of the difference with our Copilots, especially Copilot for security, is that it's not retaining any information. So like I said, you're not training a model in Copilot for security. I hate these transition slides, but love that marketing makes them. So this is probably one of my favorite slides. There's one for each of the Copilots, but it kind of shows you the data flow. So you start with a prompt, whether it's from that standalone experience or it's from one of the embeddeds. And then it's going into Copilot for security, checking what you have, what information you're grounded in. So what plugins are there, what APIs pulling in information, and then it's going to pull that data and it's going through to that model, checking it against that responsible AI. What is my response going to look like? It's also going to try and filter out some of the unnecessary extraneous information because it is getting a ton of different security information. What is going to happen? And then the prompt modification that happens behind the scenes of any kind of AI. And then that response, that's the arrow I'm missing. There we go. So then it's going to give you that response. And what's a great thing with any of the Copilots, but especially with Copilot for Security, is that it gives you its source. So if it's giving you information based upon an incident page from Sentinel, it's going to link it there. If it is giving you like that threat intelligence summary, it can link it to that threat intelligence information. And the threat intelligence piece is really what gives Copilot for Security a lot of robust value, because no matter how large your company is, you're getting that threat intelligence from any of your plugins. So like Microsoft, 78 trillion signals a day. 78 trillion. When I started 2.5 years ago, it was only 24. And it has over tripled, especially with AI. But those signals that we receive, that is what we use that gets pushed out to you as our customers. It's going into our threat intelligence defenders. It's going into the different playbooks for Sentinel. It's going into the queries that we create and help you with. It's everything that we do goes back into our products. And so anything that is blocked, those blocks and trickle down to our customers. And so you're getting all of that intelligence that we're collecting, all of that intelligence that Darktrace, Tanium, all of these companies are collecting that then go into their products and their platforms that you utilize or that your customers utilize. You get that as part of Copilot for Security with that plugin to that tool or that platform. And so again, this shows that responsible AI. And also one thing that this one doesn't show, just because like it's not, I don't say it's not as important, but most people who are using your Copilot for Security have that privileged access, that security access. But in this grounding and in this processing, pre and post processing here, this is where that access control, and these are where, like, if that person does not have access to read or does not have privileged identity to, like, I'm going to try and look up a buddy of mine's like sign-in log information, and I don't have access to that. And so like if I don't have it, the response that it gives me is not going to include that information. It's going to say, you don't have access to this. We can't show you that data. Or sometimes like it hallucinates. Like that's a big thing with the processing. Again, that's the hallucinations come from what is that information grounded in. So what that information is grounded in, which is more important for some of those like productivity, the web-based, internet-based copilots. That's where that's where you'll see more hallucinations. But with Security Copilot, it is grounded in whatever you give it access to. And it's doing the real time, like looking at the logs. It's not going to collect them and hold them. When my session is over, it's over. You'll see that when I get to the demo. And so, but it will like save so I can go back and look at my sessions, or I can pin certain things so that I can reference those later, or those go into the summary. And then these summaries that it creates, again, it's taking all of this technical investigative information, putting it into natural plain language that you can then put in your investigation reports, send up to the C-suite, go out to whoever it needs to go to, where they'll understand it. And it's doing it in like, I think one of the ones that I've kind of already run through in order just to show you from a time perspective, it took me like 15 minutes to run through the case. And it gave me within 15 minutes, I had something that I could send up to management about what's going on. And that information is also there. If you have to pass an investigation on to somebody else, they can look and see what you've done and get a quick rundown before they go do their next steps, like a lit hold.
How does this work for hybrid environments?
Yes. So for hybrid environments, that's where, again, where is this information coming from? So like if you use Sentinel and you have, Sentinel and Defender for Cloud have, connectors for AWS, or you're on-prem, you can arc those in. And I'm using all Microsoft stuff right now, but that's just because it's real quick what's in my head. So you have that. So you're getting those security logs into Sentinel. This is reasoning over Sentinel. And so it's going to be getting those logs as well. But there is that connector to AWS and getting that ability to look into like that security posture. And it's looking at, we have the security benchmarks for AWS, for GCP, for Azure. And so you can kind of have that from a compliance standpoint as well, asking if this device or this server, you can also see during an investigation, is this in compliance with our policies? If it's not, shut it down right there. And now you know. And you're not having to go like, oh, this says this device is involved in this case. Let me go over here to this dashboard, look it up. Where's that log? It's going to give it to you all right there. Like, give me this, this device's compliance. Pulls it up because it looks into Entra, Intune, etc. Because that is what's connected to it. So it's all like the quality of the information from your prompts comes from those plugins. The information you're allowing it. I'm not saying that you're feeding into it. The information you're allowing Copilot security to reason over is going to give you a more robust prompt response. And so some of our kind of major use cases, again, right now, Copilot of the future, probably add some automations. We have a lot of partners that have also created APIs or logic apps that then, based on the responses, you can then trigger that API, that information to then go and automate. So while we haven't added it to the tool itself yet, we have a lot of system integrators and partners that have done that next step. So you can have automation. It's just something that would not necessarily be out of the box with Security Copilot. It's something that you would then connect to, but an API, I'm sure, is coming down the line. But so our major use case is that incident summary, again, allowing you to have your analyst drill down into plain language without having to use their brain power, but also like that's how I learned IT was I talked to all of our techie people, and I'm like, what does this mean? I don't think the 3-star is going to understand this. And so deciphering, lovingly, what I would say geek speak into plain language for our 3-star, that's how I learned cyber. But now if you're asked to give a report, you don't have to try and think like, oh, how is he going to need to read this? You can have Copilot do it. And so that's a benefit. And then the reverse engineering of scripts is a really big thing. Again, if there's a malicious script that you find, being able to use that in your investigation, creating queries from that to go see if there's anything else that's been affected. That guided response, again, it's teaching you as it's giving you its answers, it is teaching your analyst or whomever is using Security Copilot what it is doing. So they are also then learning the processes of an investigation. So you don't necessarily, like with that talent gap that we have across the board, like this is helping close that gap. It's not taking the job away, but it's closing that gap. It's allowing time to be spent on those high fidelity critical cases and being able to do more faster. The quicker we can get an adversary out of our system, the quicker we can to save our data. And this just kind of goes in again, what for each of these, the incident summary, and the power is in the prompt, right? So there's a lot of prompts that will come out of the box. Like here are some different prompts you can use. Prompt engineering is a new position thing that is coming out. What is it? Because what your prompt says is really how that information is going to come back to you. Like again, playing with just Copilot for web with the kids this morning, they're like, ask it what Clippy eats for breakfast. I'm like, we can just go ask Bing that. Like Copilot does different stuff. Like, so the power is in the prompt. So the closer it is, like, what I want to look at, where it's coming from and how you want it, that is then going to give you a more robust response. And as you find that you have great prompts, you can then create prompt books. And so it's basically going to run all of those prompts at once. And so basically anything from an investigative standpoint, like, if you have, like failed login 10 times, if you had run something, you can have like several different prompts that are used. Just that is what the process is. We want to know X, Y, and Z. So rather than them having to enter in that prompt each time, run that prompt book, and it's going to give you everything. And I'll show you kind of that prompt book. Again, impact analysis. You know, if you have one alert, are there any other alerts that are affected by this? What other Sentinel incidents or SIEM incidents have been flagged for this user, this device? And it'll then pull in, oh, there's like 150 other incidents for this device, and they trigger X, Y, or Z. And so you get, again, rather than having to go searching, it's going to bring it all to you. And again, that reverse engineering of scripts isn't malicious, then how can we go back and see if there's anything else going on? And then that guided response. But again, that assisted threat hunting, I think, is one of the coolest things, because as you're doing that investigation, or you're like, is this IP address malicious? It's like, oh, and this also looks like it kind of goes with Manatee Tempest. Here's what we know about Manatee Tempest. Here are what other people have done. Again, giving you that guided response for that threat hunting and bringing it into each of your tools. All right, so I'm going to do I've got a few different. First one. Okay, so I have a couple like what we call guided. They're pre-canned, so that's why. If I bring my screen up. Here we go. Okay, so and the only reason why I'm going to go through this is to kind of show like a real time what it does, because it keeps all the timing. But because Copilot can be expensive, we can talk about the pricing stuff if you want to. I'm not the best at pricing, because that's I let one of the other salespeople do it. I like to just talk about the tools. But we have some pre-canned stuff just because it's easier than I do have a live that I will show, but you know, live doesn't always work. But so these show the real time of how long it took for the response. But so for this one, we can go as simple. I'm going to start simple and go complex. So don't slide off. So this is just going to be for user investigation. Just tell me about this user. You know, something came across your desk. You have the permissions to do it all. So it's giving me the information, who they are, what their user ID is. But the thing that I love as well, again, that guided, it's showing you where it's getting the information from. So if there's multiple steps that it's taking to get that information, it's going to tell you where it got that information. Because again, you can be like on the help desk, or somebody's on the help desk and they're like, I've never done this before. Tell me what's going on with Jonathan Walcott. And so then, because we're trying to see, we're investigating, we're like, okay, well, is his account enabled? You know, yes, he is enabled. And then we want to see, I think the next step is he a risky user? And this is where it's going to pull in from both Entra and Purview does some risky user stuff as well. So you'll get some Purview in there, which is my favorite. But so it's saying, based on the information, because of who he is, it's considered risky, as well as, I think it's, and then it says there's no specific details provided. So that will be depending on, again, like this one didn't search Purview for this step. So Purview is going to give potentially some of that information as far as like a data perspective. He could be, because of his position, he's an executive, you know, that could elevate him into a high risk user group, right? Because we have, you know, our capstone users, our C-suites, we're watching everything they do and everything that happens to their devices because they have the keys to the kingdom. So they're already a high risk user. So that could be why. And so we're like, all right, well, do they have any failed logins over the last month? You know, I don't know what prompted this person to want to look that up, but it gives us, there's only one. All right, so it's not because of a login issue that's caused them to be a risky user. And then, you know, you look at where they are, is that the right place that they're supposed to be? And then failure reason their account was disabled. Well, why was it disabled? And then we want to also we can look at their authentication methods from like the failed login perspective. And then it's going to show us kind of everything for this user. All right, this user's fine. I don't know why they wanted me to look him up, but this is all the information I got. You can also then, I don't think I can do it in this demo, but in this pin board, it gives you a summary of what your session was. So this session, tell me about Jonathan Walcott. You know, from a Copilot, you know, typically with your normal Copilot, you can just pivot on to the next. Okay, I'm done with that. Let's go talk about this. But with Copilot for security, you kind of like from a best practices, you want to have a session for each of the like kind of investigations that they're doing, because you can pull this summary and then have this summary be part of if you have to keep track of like your daily work, whatever. And if you pin any of these items, you can, again, like these pinned items, these are different prompts that were pinned, which you pin over here, which then pinning them pulls it over to this pin board to then give you that summary. And so this summary is something that you can use from your session information. And so any kind of questions there? That was kind of an easy one. I think this is the one that I want. All right, so this one, yes. All right, so this was a prompt book, and I actually think I wanted to show you. Right. So when I went to that initial like Copilot for security, that prompt area, when you click on the little stars, you have your prompt books. So these are prompt books. There are some that can be out of the box. These are prompt books that you can create. One of the great things about Security Copilot is that you can even set the permission so that people can only use prompt books. If you're, again, you're wary about letting full drive on the Tesla go, you can just have them use prompt books. They don't get free reign to just ask any question to Security Copilot that they want. Anything that they do will be based off of a prompt book. Or if you have people, again, that's again that access control, that data control, because they don't just have free reign. But prompt books, again, are great because it's just going to give me everything, any prompt that I would need to investigate this incident. And so there's a few different prompt books that are in here. Analyze threat actor profile. I'm going to show that one live in color. But so I use the analyze a sentinel incident, and basically when the prompt book comes up, you just put in what that incident number is, and it goes through. And so the first thing it does is summarize that incident. All right, so this was a medium severity with 10 alerts, and it gives me all the information about when those happened with a short summary of that incident. Again, great to have for if you're gonna, send it up. Is exfiltration activity. And then again, that reference, it's from the incidents page of Sentinel. And so the next question is, well, tell me about the entities. So there were 10 alerts, like who was involved? It's gonna give me that user, that IP address, the device, and then it gives you, again, that little summary at the end. And there's, at the end of everything is always this, how is this response? Because it needs to still like learn, like, how do you want Copilot to be responding to you? Is it great? Is it good? Too verbose? And so it can then, the next time you run this, it'll give you something better, something that you're more looking for. And so it gives me all of that information. And, this IP address is associated with malicious file download. That's curious. So our next thing, well, what's the reputation score? This is when we start to get into that threat intelligence piece. That reputation score is something that, comes from our Defender for Threat Intel, which you get with Copilot for security. And so it's going to give you that information about that IP address and the different scores. And then where it's seen, Silk Typhoon, like, what do I know about that? You could potentially even ask it for information about Silk Typhoon. And then it's also going to give you that threat intelligence information if you want to go deeper into those specific alerts. And so then we're like, okay, well, was it Michael Scott that did it? So it's going to say like, what is the authentication method for each of the users involved? Again, authentication, one of those main things that we look at. Do they have password, MFA, passkey, etc.? What are our policies? And so it's going to show for everything that you have for those users involved. And then if anything else, like it says like the tap is expired, so it's not usable. So, okay, the tap wasn't used for anything that he's done. Now, and then this, because sometimes you don't have users, because again, I could be an analyst that does not have access to see who I am investigating, but I can see what I am investigating. Again, that's that privileged access. So the next prompt, if a user is listed in the incident, and sometimes it's not necessarily a user-based incident, so we can ask them, are they compliant? Are they out of compliance? And again, it's showing you those different steps. It's checking into, and it's really checking device compliance with that as far as, their device, their geolocation. And it tells you where it's looking, and it's giving you basically that information that's like straight from Intune. So you're getting both the technical, and it is driving it down to kind of a more easily readable, digestible piece. And then again, for any outputs from Intune, what is the most recent? Because if it might give you like 100, like, well, I don't care, from before, what's most recent? Again, so it's giving you all of that information, and this is all, and I didn't, like when I went through this, I didn't have to ask each of these questions. I just ran the prompt book and it runs this. And so, as the model is updating, as OpenAI is, going to GPT 4.0, 5.0, it's getting faster and faster. So again, excuse me, when we talk about cost, it's computing units. So it's how much time are you spending using this tool? Again, that's why if you want, have them only use prompt books, it's going to not have them in the tool as much, but the faster the tool is, the less time it takes for it to run, driving down that cost. And then again, at the very end, write me an executive summary. It should be set for a non-technical audience because this is going up to my C-suite, and it gives you all of that information. And you could probably even like tell it, can you make it less technical? But it gives you all like that key information that they need to know. All right, I'm going to do one more that's pre-canned, and then I'm going to kind of show a couple things in the live. But so the embedded experience. This is also great because you're using Defender, and Defender has that attack disruption. It's pulling in, it's got its own AI and machine learning stuff that it's doing. And Copilot gives you, again, that guided response, and that's what you're going to get from Copilot. But so if we look at the incidents and we're looking at this business email compromise, one thing, because kind of in here, what you see, and if this happens, and we looked at the business email compromise from the standalone, oh, thank you. From the standalone version, it will tell us, Defender disabled the account. So one of the things so this is where kind of that automation comes in. Again, Copilot for security is not doing it yet, or not without help, but because if you're using Defender, you have the attack disruption capability, that is still going to be happening. Again, Copilot is not doing stuff in place of Defender. It's just bringing in that information from Defender for your investigation. So in Defender, we see that we've got this business email compromise. Here is the story of what exactly happened. Because again, here in Defender is where you get that picture, that you're going to get that incident graph. Can I show it bigger? If you've never seen this before. So basically, like the incident graph will show you what's happened where, what entities, what users are involved, and it can show you that attack path kind of in a visual graphical form. And it's all done, and it does this cool little thing where it can show you what's happened and anything that you have from an automation perspective, from playbooks, from the attack disruption, anything that you've already put into Defender or Sentinel from an automated perspective is going to still be happening, and it's going to show you here. But because this sequence, it recognized as business email compromise, it gets tagged with the business email compromise, which then, again, when it's tagged as a business email compromise, that can trigger automated remediation and response, like disabling the account. And then with the Copilot embedded experience, and actually what I wanted to do is when you first open the incident, of course it's not going to happen. Well, there's like a pop out that comes out that says, oh, here it is. Different recommendations. This is a phishing incident. Here's the response playbook. Here is this response playbook. Here are related threats. So you do still get some of that correlation in Defender, depending on how you have everything connected. And again, it's that guided response. And when you're looking at the incident summary, it's then saying, hey, confirm that this is a true positive. Like, how do you want to classify it? It's phishing. So we classify it as phishing, and it's giving you all of those steps just like right there in line with what you're looking at in the Defender portal. And then remediation actions, because it was a compromise, we're just going to force password reset. And then now that's pretty much hopefully taken care of. We'll monitor. It's going to continue to like monitor if any other alerts come in that are related to this. But this is so Copilot embedded, giving you that guided response, telling you, but this is where you can then do the actions within that Copilot because you're technically in Defender, whereas the standalone is just pulling that information into you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How does this work for offices from China? Like, is there any, will this work, in China? I mean, we already have problems where they can't really access everything in our environment. So like, how will this work for our people in China?
So it'll be based upon, so that office in Thailand, how are you getting the alerts and signals and logs from their usage? And then, so how are you getting alerts that's being fed again into Sentinel? It's going to tell, like when you go and you do the investigation and you look at the user information, the entity information, it'll tell you where they logged in from or who that user is. And so that's how you would associate it with a multi-geo situation. But again, it's all based upon how are the alerts getting into here. Copilot's not necessarily worried about that office over there. But if those devices are in Intune, if those identities are managed in Entra, then that's where Copilot's getting its information from. It's getting that information from Entra, from Intune, from
Now I have a question.
Sentinel. Okay.
With that statement, are you copying, are you making a separate entity of this information, or are you pulling it direct?
Pulling it direct.
You see the problem with that in a pen tester environment? If you pull it direct and we manipulated it or deleted it without any kind of remote code execution, that data goes away. Just putting it out there.
Yeah. And I'm sure if I were a smarter person, I want to get the answer to that. So,
That's important. The way
yeah.
we talked about these guardrails.
Yeah.
Is critical when you're talking about investigation.
Sure.
Because I can tell you from a hacker's perspective, that stuff will disappear if I have access to it.
But there's a log of that. Like there's somewhere it's
Log you will see is user deleted this information. That's what you'll see.
yeah. Well, and if that's I'll have to,
So if you're
Yeah.
not making a copy of, you're not protecting that data as you manipulate or whatever you do, and that's gonna be
So-
another problem.
oh, are you saying, so when I do this investigation and then it gets deleted?
No,
Or-
I'm talking about during the actual incident.
So the logs it's pulling immutable, so those can't be deleted. The data itself, like if it was SharePoint, that's like a compromise, that of course could get deleted,
Well,
but
that's what I'm talking about, during the.
So that data, well, so in, like, if you think about, okay, so in Purview, when we talk about data investigation, right? So this is looking at, this can pull to Purview and it can say, oh, this person tripped off this communications compliance, but in Purview, which I can also pull up, if someone triggers an alert, or if that like data exfiltration, there is a copy, if you will, because that's in Purview. So that's separate from like the Copilot for security. But like if somebody is part of an insider risk, or like they've triggered an insider risk management policy, that data exfiltration, then it's going to say, hey, it's this incident, this insider risk management alert. And then you can go and you can see that information, and within the alert, because what Purview Insider Risk Management does is show, again, that data, that it's looking at, that graph is going to look at the data, not necessarily like the user itself, but it's going to look at that person downloaded from SharePoint, changed the classification, printed it, or put it on a USB or emailed it somewhere and then deleted it. And that's going to be an exfiltration sequence. And then you can look at, because in Purview it's content search. So even when stuff is deleted, it's kind of sitting out there in the ether in like the big recycle bin for like 90 days. And then you got the backup recycle bin for like 90 days. And another. So because it's there, Purview can see that, not necessarily like, but so Purview will see that. And so because if you have Purview connected to Copilot for security, you'll be able to then access that. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
But I want to talk more.
Problems don't exist.
Yeah, so there is an answer, and I just don't have it in my head right now. But I know that there is an
And
answer.
I agree
because-
with Beth early on in that statement. It scares the hell out of me, and this is why. Because I'm relying on stuff that, can be changed, and my data will be different. And if I can manipulate it, God will help us if, an insider threat had access to this at a system level, they can make the changes automatically and make it very.
But not necessarily, because so you cannot make changes from the security Copilot interface, and you cannot make changes to Copilot security itself unless they compromise that, like, if you have like two people who have those God rights in Copilot for security for setting up the permissioning and everything.
I'm just thinking of system level access, not necessarily somebody who is, the keys to, they would have to have keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
you're saying system level, like on the workstation that was
On
commented.
anything that has access, anything that manipulates or communicates, and this is going back to your original diagram, you had like those 6 different steps.
Mhm.
Everything that points into it has an ability for input validation or input manipulation. That's what I'm concerned about, because that's where the hackers are going to go, and especially if we know how it works.
And that's where, when like the kind of that responsible AI and how we build things,
Mhm.
we are thinking about those prompt injections and what is it, like malicious
So that's the problem
prompting.
that we have with ChatGPT and the visual
And-
and all of that.
And that's why this is not connected to those main
Right, but the
open.
principles apply. And again, I'm looking at your guardrails.
Yeah.
Those same problems that we have is, oh, you didn't answer it this way. Well, let me ask it this way. And eventually you get, a response that you want.
And so there are like ways around that, and I want to find the exact proper answer, so I will look for that. But that is something that we do take into consideration, and like have time, I can pull up that slide about what that, like, kind of some of those things of what it looks like and what we are thinking about when it comes to that responsible AI and that safety and security of this, because that is the last thing that we want.
Right. It's a little bit longer answer, and we'll get that for you. Okay, because we
Yeah.
can go into that for hours probably.
Yes. Okay, so now for live, Why is it this one? All right. Right over here. Go this way. Okay, so this is my GCC. So I'm just gonna use this prompt. So let me see. So we're gonna say, show me sign-in logs for Michael Crane. Maybe. There we go. Of course, it's going to be a little bit slower than it was this morning. Always happens live. So again, so this is okay live. How many? 4 seconds. This is even took a little bit longer. I think it took me 5 seconds when I ran it yesterday. But as you can see, I cannot see it because I do not have the privileged access to it. So again, that's where those guardrails for people getting that information that they might not have access to. And I can't just sit here and be like, tell me all the things, like tell me about him. I think I asked if I even asked if he was a risky user, and it's like you can't get that information. And that's because this is in this Copilot, I only have like read access or something simple. But so then to kind of show you the prompt books. And again, these are all prompt books that are kind of come out of the box. We're going to do this threat actor profile. And so basically this is kind of when you go into those prompt books or those like query hunting, like you want to generate a query, it'll tell you what information it needs. You give it a little bit of that information and then it'll either create the query or for this, it's going to run the prompt book. So we're going to look up Manatee Tempest. We love our Russians. Oops. Why are you not doing this? Yeah. Right? Hold on. Oh, that's why. Haha, starting a session. See? That's also why we love live. And then so it tells, so you can even look at it before you run it. Jesus Moses. Interestingly enough, I had to do it there next. Oh, that's why. Edit. Practice everything, all you need. All right. And that's it. So now it's going to run. I think it took me 60 seconds before. But it's going to run through each of those 5 queries and then give you the responses. So Manatee Tempest, also known as Evil Core from 2014. It gives you all of that information and then it'll give you that reference. So this is just to show you kind of the live response time. So 27 seconds for this first one. And that gives me the TTPs and what they try and do. And let's go down to the next responses. And so it's going to run through the first response and then I'll kind of keep going. And then we asked, are there any other from the MITRE attack techniques? And then any article. So again, this is all that information and it's pulling from Defender for Threat Intelligence for that. And then it gives you, again, different information as far as how you want that information presented or what you can then bring. And so again, it's still kind of going through, but from like a real time, this is what we want to look for. It goes pretty quick rather than having to go search, Control F. So it's really there to help. With 3 minutes to spare, are there any questions other than the one we have left hanging that I want to get the answer to? No, I like it. Listen, I don't know everything. I don't say that I know everything. So that's why I try to surround myself with smart people at Microsoft. So
Nothing.
no questions? Well, if you come up with questions later, we'll have more time. Thank you.
All together.
10 minutes.
Give a 10-minute
We have a 10-minute break for our next session. Bathroom, coffee.
We brought some waters in over here. Just grab a bottle. Okay.
Me too. Me too.
How does it work?
Absolutely.
Well, that's
Oh, Italy. Yeah, you probably see my screen. No, it's not on. No, it was great. Yeah.
Well, it could be very. Something I won't. I don't look at it. It's very much. Hopefully 3 seconds. Double check. This information makes my life that's very, very fast. And so having levels of access control. Different level of access. Access. So how the communications happens. All the other locations. When she first brought this up, I was
You have content,
yes. Because you can't get all the information.
You got it. You can pay for
Unless you're making if you go out. She asked questions.
So I think
Much like here. Yeah, man.
like Jeff.
I understand. That didn't happen on inside my network. That didn't happen on
Oh,
my
yeah.
first customer. Got that information. That's not. So there was something that took place outside.
So you've already taken plans and other.
One of my first
Can I?
Created location earlier. So we're gonna put- you got that, maybe links, maybe something in there that.
Yeah. It's all,
I'm in marketing.
it's all integrated into some.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Plans, everything,
I've been doing
technology
this
in
for a
general.
little while now.
I think you'll find it.
Another question.
I do like the different, but I love this.
You're like, oh. Right, red tag teaming, double teaming.
Well done. Yeah, your call's done, well, for them, I always make a couple of Microsoft. Barsky, Aaron's a little like. You know.
With this.
Where you out of?
Good question. So I've done that too.
Yeah.
I got one.
Like 3 or.
Tell me, they have.
You got.
Yeah.
Those.
Well.
Yes, sir. So you were, you're at wedding. You have your.
These are.
You know, John Schumann?
Some guy one time. Yep.
Figured out.
Well, the data is.
Really do.
Yeah, you know, Jason.
Yeah, he's not even a general splat, not talking.
Oh, right. Yeah. The Jason's sister. All the same.
So what do you think?
Generation going in.
Certification.
So that last, the last. It's been. So we, bro, that's.
You do.
We
do.
Let's see.
Quick as I see. No, I didn't. Oh, you guys were. I didn't know you.
Or something.